Good day, everyone. You're welcome to this week's Business and Investment Tips program, a production of RCCG Christ Church Radio with Ayodeji Ebo, an investment professional. This week, we discuss our views on the approved federal government's 2023 budget. President Buhari signed the 2023 budget into law last week, along with the 2022 finance bill, thereby upholding the January to December budget cycle for the fourth consecutive year. The approved 2023 budget was tagged Budget of Fiscal Consolidation and Transition, as we expect a new government to implement the budget from May 29, 2023. The budget figures were based on assumptions which include oil prices at $75 per barrel versus $70 per barrel in the proposed budget, oil production at 1.69 million barrels per day, the exchange rate at 435.57 naira per dollar, projected inflation rate at 17.16%, and the projected growth rate at 3.75%. The assumptions are largely optimistic given the current challenges and the poor budget performance for 2022 as at November. Hence, it is an uphill task to meet up with these expectations. The approved 2023 budget expenditure is 21.5 trillion naira, a 1.3 trillion naira increase over the proposed budget. 2023 revenue is estimated at 10.5 trillion naira, 761 billion naira higher than the proposed budget. Recurrent expenditure, debt and non-debt, was projected at about 67% or 14.6 trillion naira of the total budget. The revenue is projected based on the expected income or receipts from the sale of crude oil, taxes, duties, and income from government-owned enterprises. Oil revenue is projected at 2.2 trillion naira or 21.3% of total revenue, while non-oil revenue has been estimated at 2.4 trillion naira. The balance of 5.4 trillion naira is expected to come from other revenue sources, including the operating surplus of ministries, departments and agencies, MDAs, and government-owned enterprises, GOE. The budget of fiscal deficit, which is the difference between the projected expenditure and revenue, is expected at 11.3 trillion naira for 2023. Our view on the approved budget. 1. The revenue projection is largely optimistic when the most recent 2022 budget performance is considered. Federal government's retained revenue settled at 6.5 trillion naira as of November 2022, 87% of the prorated target of 7.5 trillion naira. This can be linked to the 74% underperformance in oil revenue as of November 2022. This is over 1 trillion naira gap. At the same run rate, the expected revenue for 2022 will be 7.8 trillion naira, which is 3.4 trillion naira short of the 10.4 trillion naira projected for 2023. 2. The budget assumptions are unrealistic given the current state of the domestic and global economy, specifically meeting the projected oil production of 1.69 million barrels per day would be a tall order given the current production of 1.3 million barrels per day. Also, the projected average exchange rate and inflation rates are unrealistic given the recent trends. 3. The projected growth of 3.75% is achievable but shows a lack of ambition given the high poverty rate in Nigeria. Nigeria needs to grow at between 5 to 7% annually to experience an improved standard of living. 4. The budget fiscal deficit may settle around 14.7 trillion naira based on last year's revenue performance. This is derived from the revenue gap of 3.4 trillion naira from 2022 and the approved budget deficit of 11.3 trillion naira for 2023. This will further drive up debt servicing in 2024. 5. The federal government has indicated its intention to eliminate petroleum subsidies in June 2023. As a result, 3.4 trillion naira was provided for PMS subsidy. If this is sustained for the year, this will be about 6.8 trillion naira, which is higher than the budget for capital expenditure. Also, this will push the fiscal deficit to 18 trillion naira, which is alarming. However, the decision will mainly rest on the new administration, given the expected change in government. 6. Debt servicing projection is 75% higher at 6.8 trillion naira compared to 3.6 trillion naira in the approved budget of 2022. Debt servicing is the cost of past borrowing. Debt servicing accounts for 31% of projected expenditure and 60% of projected revenue in 2023. This raises debt sustainability concerns as most of the debts are channeled to non-productive sectors, that is, recurrent expenditure. 7. Capital expenditure, 6.4 trillion naira accounts for 30% of the total expenditure. Capital expenditure is the portion that benefits the larger proportion of the economy and aids economic growth. For effectiveness, the funds should be structured primarily as counterparty funding for private sector-driven projects. Also, the federal government should accelerate the kickoff of the Infrastructure Corporation of Nigeria, Infracore, to mobilize the resources necessary to reduce the infrastructure gap. 8. A breakdown of the statutory transfers shows that 228.1 billion naira and 173.6 billion naira have been allocated to NAS, including severance and inauguration costs, and INEC, given it's an election year, respectively. 9. Education sector had 1.8 trillion naira or 8.2% of the federal government budget, while the health sector had 1.2 trillion naira or 5.3% of the federal government budget for 2023. Both numbers include both recurrent and capital expenditure. Overall, the budget is not expected to deliver any consequential economic growth given the continued revenue challenges amidst rising debt servicing and poor expenditure priorities. Please note that this is the federal government's budget and not the budget for the states. Thank you for listening. Please join us same time next week for another interesting and insightful session. For comments and feedback, kindly forward to ebo.ayodeji@gmail.com or send an SMS to 07082463747. Stay blessed.